The courtroom buzzed with an air of unease, a stark contrast to the bright fluorescent lights illuminating the polished wood and gleaming metal fixtures. The clattering of heels against the tiled floor mixed with hushed whispers from a variety of onlookers. Family members seeking justice, victims waiting for closure, and curious citizens eager to witness the workings of the LAW. The front. A row of benches held a diverse assembly, some dressed in sharp suits, others in worn clothing that hinted at their struggles. At the center of this charged environment stood the judge, a woman of resolute stature and a commanding presence. She had earned her respect through years of unwavering dedication to justice. Yet beneath her composed exterior lay an undercurrent of fatigue from the weight of her responsibilities. As she glanced over the docket, her gaze settled on the next case, a homeless man, his name printed boldly on the page. The man shuffled nervously at the front, his disheveled hair and soiled clothes telling a story of hardship and despair. The judge couldn't help but wonder how he had arrived in this moment. And as she prepared to call him forward, the atmosphere thickened with anticipation, setting the stage for a confrontation that would transcend mere legalities. As the judge called his name, the homeless man stepped forward, his movements hesitant and burdened by the weight of countless hardships. His clothes hung loosely from his gaunt frame, a patchwork of frayed fabric that had long since lost any semblance of cleanliness. The deep weathering marked his face, where lines told tales of sleepless nights on cold benches and relentless battles with hunger. His hair was unkempt, streaks of dirt blending into the disarray, giving him a ghostly appearance in stark contrast to the polished surroundings of the courtroom. He shifted nervously from foot to foot, eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape or some glimmer of support. The faint tremor in his hands revealed his anxiety. This was not just a routine hearing for him, but a pivotal moment that could decide his fate. With each heartbeat, he could feel the scrutiny of those present, each gaze a reminder of his circumstances. This wasn't merely an encounter with the law. Instead, it represented the accumulation of choices made in desperate times, a downward spiral initiated by unforeseen circumstances, loss of employment, fractured relationships, and mounting bills that spiraled him into a life. On the streets that he stood before the judge, he embodied not just himself, but a broader narrative of struggle that so many faced. The judge, a woman in her late 50s, commanded respect with her poised demeanor and sharp intellect. Known for her unwavering commitment to fairness and justice, she had built a reputation as a fierce advocate for the rights of the marginalized. Yet, beneath the surface of her distinguished career lay hidden biases that stemmed from her own tumultuous past. Raised in a modest neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, she had witnessed firsthand the struggles faced by those on the fringes of society. As she glanced at the homeless man before her, memories flooded back. Faces of friends lost to addiction and family members who had slipped through the cracks of the system. These recollections tugged at her conscience, battling against her professional obligation to uphold the law impartially. The judge felt a familiar pang of empathy mixed with frustration. She understood that circumstances often dictated one's fate more than individual choices. In that moment, the weight of her responsibilities felt heavier than ever. She was not just a figure of authority, but also a woman grappling with her own experiences and values. As she prepared to speak, the air in the courtroom thickened. It was clear that this case would challenge both her principles and her heart. As the judge reviewed the docket, her eyes fell upon the name of the homeless man standing before her. A jolt of recognition struck her like lightning. It was a name she had not encountered in years: Tommy Reynolds. He had been a promising young student, full of potential and dreams, once sitting in her classroom with enthusiasm that could light up the darkest days. Memories of his bright smile and eager questions flooded her mind, intertwining with images of his gradual decline over the years. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The weight of his situation felt personal, as if fate had conspired to bring them back together under these dire circumstances. She remembered how Tommy had struggled after his father lost his job, how he had taken on odd jobs to help support his family while keeping up with schoolwork. Yet, one day he vanished from her radar, swallowed by life's harsh realities. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow. This was no ordinary case. The judge's heart raced as she processed the significance of their connection. How had a bright future devolved into this moment of despair? As she prepared to speak, she felt an overwhelming urge to reach out, not just as a judge, but as someone who once believed in him. That as the courtroom fell silent, the weight of her thoughts pressed heavily on the judge's mind. Memories of Tommy flooded her with a bittersweet nostalgia, his laughter reverberating in her classroom, his bright eyes filled with dreams, and the palpable hope she had felt for his future. Now, standing before her in a tattered guise, she couldn't reconcile the promising young man she once knew with the broken spirit that faced her today. The judge took a deep breath, attempting to regain her composure, but emotions churned within her like a storm. She understood the legal framework that dictated her actions, but felt an overwhelming urge to break free from its constraints. Could she truly uphold the law while knowing the human cost behind it? The principle she had vowed to defend now seemed starkly at odds with the compassion stirring in her heart. In that pregnant pause, tension rippled through the courtroom. Onlookers exchanged anxious glances, sensing an unexpected shift in the atmosphere. The judge's internal struggle eclipsed the proceedings as she contemplated the implications of her next words. This moment was no longer just about justice. It was about connection, loss, and the fragile thread that linked their pasts. Would she dare to bridge that divide? As the judge's mind swirled with emotions, vivid flashbacks transported her to a time when Tommy was just a bright-eyed student filled with dreams. She recalled their first encounter in her classroom, where he had been an eager participant, his hand always shooting up to answer questions. His ambition radiated through his every action. He wanted to be a scientist, fueled by a passion for discovery that inspired his classmates. Over the years, the judge had taken on the role of mentor, guiding him through academic challenges and imparting a belief in his capabilities. She remembered the pride she felt as he delivered a speech on environmental issues, his voice steady and persuasive. But life had other plans. Soon after, she learned of his family struggles, the loss of his father's job, and the creeping despair that began to cloud Tommy's bright future. One poignant memory surfaced. The day he told her about taking on 3 part-time jobs to help support his family. His determination left a lasting impression on her heart. But it was also then that she sensed an ominous shift in his spirit. The young man she had believed in seemed to fade gradually from view, lost amid the hardships that would ultimately lead him to this courtroom moment. Standing before her in desperation, the judge stood in contemplative silence. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Palpably, the audience, initially focused on the proceedings, began to sense an undercurrent of tension emanating from the bench. Whispers circulated among the spectators as they exchanged glances, puzzled by the judge's sudden change in demeanor. Those who knew her well could see the conflict flickering across her face. Something personal, something deep. That a mother in the back row clutched her child's hand tightly, recalling her own struggles and drawing parallels between her life and Tommy's plight. That a young man near the front, a law student observing with keen interest, felt the weight of significance in this moment. He wondered how the judge would navigate this emotional terrain. Meanwhile, an older gentleman crossed his arms skeptically, unconvinced that personal feelings should interfere with legal judgment. The judge cleared her throat, but the silence that followed felt charged with unspoken questions. Why was she hesitating? What was holding her back from issuing a ruling? Entire courtrooms seemed to lean forward collectively, anticipating a revelation or perhaps a deviation from standard procedure. An uncharacteristic emotional wave had washed over the proceedings, igniting curiosity and concern among everyone present about what would unfold next. The judge took a moment to steady herself, knowing that her next words could change the course of Tommy's life. She felt the weight of the gavel in her hand, a symbol of authority and order, yet it suddenly felt heavy with the burden of her memories and emotions. The courtroom was silent, all eyes fixed on her, each spectator grasping the significance of the moment. As she looked into Tommy's eyes, she saw not just a homeless man, but a representation of lost potential and unfulfilled dreams. The nostalgia for the bright young student he once was clashed with the stark reality before her. Her mind raced. Could she truly uphold the law while ignoring the heartache behind his circumstances? The balance between duty and empathy tugged at her conscience, pulling her in conflicting directions. In an unexpected turn, the judge drew a deep breath and decided to speak from her heart. Rather than issuing a standard sentence that would further marginalize him, she proposed a community service program tailored to help reintegrate him into society. This decision surprised even herself, but felt right. An opportunity for healing rather than punishment. In that moment of vulnerability, she stepped away from her strict role as judge and embraced her humanity instead. With the audience hanging on her every word, the judge took a deep breath and began to speak about the larger systemic issues that contribute to homelessness. She addressed the courtroom, her voice steady but filled with emotion, emphasizing how societal failures, like inadequate mental health support, lack of affordable housing, and unemployment, often led individuals like Tommy into despair. Her words resonated in the air, transforming the atmosphere from one of tension to a shared understanding of collective responsibility. She paused to look at Tommy, feeling the weight of his story as she continued. "Today isn't just about what you've done or where you are now," she said earnestly. "It's about recognizing that so many factors have led you here, and we must not lose sight of the human being behind the circumstances." As she elaborated on her vision for compassion-driven justice, she felt a sense of liberation within herself. The courtroom listened intently as she proposed not merely a punishment, but a path forward, an opportunity for Tommy to engage in community service that could foster his reintegration and restore his dignity. This pivotal moment marked a significant reevaluation of her stance on justice, revealing her commitment to creating solutions rather than perpetuating cycles of despair. As she concluded her statement, the judge looked around the courtroom, taking in the mixed expressions of hope and uncertainty. "I propose that Tommy Reynolds be placed in a community service program," she declared, her voice resonating with conviction. This decision is not only about addressing the actions that brought him here today, but also about acknowledging the circumstances that led to those actions. A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience, some shaking their heads while others leaned forward, intrigued by this unorthodox resolution. The judge continued, passionately advocating for a system that emphasizes rehabilitation over punishment. "Tommy has potential. He once inspired his peers with visions for a better world. It's vital that we don't extinguish that spark merely because he has stumbled along the way." With a nod toward Tommy, she added, "This isn't about denying accountability. It's about giving him the tools to rebuild his life." As she outlined the specifics of the community service, including a mentorship component and support resources, a sense of stirring possibility filled the room. This innovative approach signaled a transformative moment not only for Tommy, but for justice itself, an opportunity to break free from cycles of despair and begin anew. As the courtroom session concluded, a profound change settled over both Tommy and the judge. For Tommy, the proposed community service program represented more than just an alternative to punishment. It was a lifeline, a chance to reclaim his dignity and purpose. With renewed hope flickering in his eyes, he envisioned a path that could lead him back to stability, perhaps even reigniting the dreams that had once inspired him. The weight of despair began to lift as he felt the warmth of possibility for the first time in years. Meanwhile, the judge experienced a transformative moment of her own. Witnessing Tommy's reaction sparked within her a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that true justice involves compassion and understanding, addressing not just individual actions, but also their broader contexts. This encounter reinvigorated her commitment to advocate for systemic change within the legal framework, seeking to implement solutions that consider the humanity behind every case. As she left the courtroom, she felt lighter, empowered by this pivotal decision that transcended traditional judgments. The connection forged in that brief moment would resonate throughout her career, inspiring her to approach future cases with empathy and a commitment to justice that honors both accountability and humanity. As the courtroom doors closed behind them, the broader implications of this encounter lingered in the air. The case of Tommy Reynolds was not an isolated incident. It highlighted the urgent need to address homelessness and the systemic failures that contribute to it. Each individual facing similar circumstances carries a unique story, often marked by societal neglect and misunderstanding. This moment served as a poignant reminder that justice must encompass compassion, recognizing that people are more than their circumstances. The judge's decision to propose community service instead of punishment invites us all to reflect on our perceptions of justice and responsibility. How often do we look past the human being to focus solely on actions? The narrative of Tommy is emblematic of countless others who struggle in silence, their potential overshadowed by hardship. This encounter calls for action, not just within the courtroom, but in our communities. It urges us to advocate for policies that provide support, understanding, and rehabilitation rather than incarceration. As individuals, we hold the power to influence change by choosing empathy over judgment and understanding over condemnation. By doing so, we can foster a society that uplifts its most vulnerable members and paves the way for hope and renewal for all.